The U.S. president says he's worked out a deal with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and formed the framework of that future deal with respect to Greenland. For more on what it could mean, let's go to Marko Papic. He's chief strategist at BCA Research. Marko, thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Why do you think this happened so quickly? We had the U.S. president speak at Davos today saying he has removed the idea of going militarily into Greenland, which investors were relieved about. And only hours later, there is a deal. Why do you think this came about as quickly as it did?
My view is that President Trump should not be analyzed by starting off with his preferences. I think that President Trump, more so than any politician maybe that investors have had to deal with, doesn't really have set preferences. So don't try to figure out what he wants. What's important is to figure out what constrains him. What are the constraints around the president? And it was very clear over the last several weeks, not so much the reaction from the rest of the world, because that's given. It was really the reaction from his own Republican Party. I mean, several Republican senators were very harsh in their assessment of how intelligent this move was. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, a conservative Republican, called it weapons-grade stupid. Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina said, you know what gets me cranky in the morning? Stupid. And so I think it was that reaction from his own party, and not from centrist Republicans. I mean, we're talking some pretty conservative, some strong allies of his that changed his mind.
Okay, so if you look at the constraints, and you mentioned what some members of his own party had to say, are you also considering constraints beyond that? Constraints, for example, with NATO in play, constraints on European trade. Are you looking at those kinds of constraints as well?
I think we as investors should look at an array of constraints. You're absolutely correct. I just think that it's pretty shocking how fast this episode ended. I mean, let's take, for example, the fact that your team contacted me, I think last week, maybe early this week, and then by the time that we're here on air, the issue is over. So I think we both agree this was a little faster in terms of how quickly the taco trade unraveled. And so I think that the difference this time from, let's say, April 2nd with the tariffs was just his own allies. But I agree with you. There were other things, of course, as well, including market reaction as well.
Is this perhaps a sign of the same cycle that's being repeated now, losing some of the power because people are figuring it out and sort of cutting into it? And perhaps that's why we're seeing things move as quickly as we did this time?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. On one hand, the market reaction on Tuesday, when the U.S. markets were open, was pretty powerful. So I would say, I hesitate to say that sort of the investment community has learned to take a breath and ignore some of the strong words from President Trump, because I think we both agree Tuesday was pretty dramatic. On the other hand, your point is valid that President Trump himself may be learning that there's diminishing returns. In this particular case, everything is fine. We've put Greenland back in the box. We're all good. But the reality is that for whatever reason that he wanted Greenland, President Trump that is, he was, at least for a few weeks or a month, willing to burn the Western alliance for the sake of it. And even though it's not resolved and everyone's friendly and it's the magic of Davos, that solved it all. The problem is that if you're a policymaker running a European country, you now have to start thinking about a future where maybe it doesn't turn around this quickly.
Do you expect Trump to still pursue purchasing Greenland? We don't know the details of this framework agreement. Clearly, it's been okayed in a very initial stage. But do you expect Trump to push for more if he doesn't like the details when they're released?
I do expect President Trump to use Greenland as a potential technical, legal reason to impose tariffs on Europe if those tariffs are removed by the Supreme Court. And I think this is something that's where I would try to connect the dots here. President Trump is in a lot of pressure. He's under a lot of pressure. His signature legislation, think Obamacare and Obama, right? Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has made that connection. This is like Trump's Obamacare. I mean, it's tariffs. If the Supreme Court of the United States rules against them, I mean, that is a big deal. And I think that he may need to resurrect tariff as a national security issue in order to justify future national security tariffs on Europe. So think of it in that way. It's like a legal, arrow in his quiver, if you will. But I would say one more thing. I do think the path forward is simply to allow the people of Greenland to choose. I think that's probably where this is headed over the next 5 years, maybe even shorter. And I think once they choose to, let's say, be independent, I absolutely do not consider a future where 57,000 people choose a geopolitical direction of North Atlantic. Like, that is not a future that exists. At no point over the short term, medium term, long term will 57,000 people who inhabit Greenland have actual sovereignty over their foreign policy and defense. And so the solution is just to give them independence, a vote at the UN. They can run domestic policy, but obviously they will have to sign a treaty with either the US or Denmark that, gives those NATO member states complete control over their defense and foreign policy.
What do you think the announcement today, this afternoon, that there is some sort of deal does to the Sell America theme that keeps popping up?
I think it's tough to connect the deal with the Sell America trade. I think that Sell America trade focuses on the wrong part of the trade. There isn't a Sell America trade, in my view, and this has been my strong view for over 18 months. So I've been telling my clients that non-US equity markets would outperform, and they did in a big way last year, and I think that will continue. But that's not a Sell America trade, that's buy rest of the world trade. Now, of course, the fact is most of my clients are 60 to 80% overweight US. And so naturally, they will have to sell America to buy at least some of those assets outside of the US dollar zone. But it's not necessarily because America is collapsing. It's more that the rest of the world is reacting to aggressive, but quite frankly, sometimes honest Trump statements. They're reacting to it by saying, like, yeah, I mean, he is right. 80% of our trade does go to the US. So maybe we should do something about that. And that was what Prime Minister Carney said in Davos. The reason it was a profound statement was that he told the Davos elite, stop pearl clutching. The world you're talking about is over. Americans are not going to be nice to us. Let's instead take their honest but aggressive assessment of where we are and try to do something about it. And in the process of doing something about it, say a country like Canada, breaking down provincial trade barriers, making new trade connections with the rest of the world, becoming a bridge between Europe and Asia. Hey, that sounds to me as an investor like a pretty good reason to load up on Canadian assets. So the process of divesting and becoming more sovereign, whether you're Europe, South Korea, Japan, whether it's Canada, that process in of itself is market positive. And that's why it's not Sell America trade. It's buy rest of the world trade.
Marko, got to leave it there, sir. Appreciate your time with this. Thank you.